Hi everybody, welcome to another instalment of our webinar series here at Prosper Squared. If you're unfamiliar with Prosper Squared, we are a business club and rewards programme exclusively for business owners and directors in the UK. I'm Grace Douglas, part of the marketing team here at Prosper Squared, and I'm delighted to welcome you today to our webinar all on Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is huge, not just at the moment, but since its invention in 2009, it's the largest cryptocurrency measured by market capitalization. Even if you don't know much about Bitcoin, you've probably heard about it being said and talked about, especially recently. And that's why we're here today, to learn more. Whether you're a business owner who wants to fully utilize it as a payment method, or you're coming from a consumer angle, or whether you're just interested, I'm sure we'll all learn something by the end of today's session. And we'll learn this with the help of two industry experts. Today, we're joined by the CEO and co-founder of Bitcoin exchange, CoinCorner, Danny Scott. Hi, Danny.
Hi, Grace. Thank you for having us on.
That's okay. And we're also joined by Molly Spiers, who is the head of Marcoms and PR at CoinCorner. Hey, Molly.
Hi, Grace.
And both Molly and Danny are co-hosts of Bitcoin podcast Bitcoiners, as well as co-founders of Mount Socks, which are a Bitcoin socks, which are not only cool but educational too. Bitcoin is an incredibly fast-paced industry to be in, so thank you both for joining us today. And if you guys want to ask any questions today, please place them in the chat box below. Anything related to Bitcoin, and Molly and Daniel answer them at the end. And that's said with an emphasis on Bitcoin as well, just to keep on track, and we can, as we've got such a short amount of time. So let's start from the start, and probably what everyone is wondering: what is Bitcoin, and why is it making such a splash?
Okay, where do we start? So Bitcoin, I guess in the white paper, so it came in around in 2009 or 2008, 2009. Back then there was something called the white paper, which Satoshi Nakamoto released, which was an explanation, kind of a quick short, 8 pages of information about what Bitcoin is and how it works. In that, he defined that as a peer-to-peer digital currency. So it's a decentralized, the way people see it now is a decentralized global digital currency, effectively. It's a new concept, of course, similar to the internet back in the early 90s. You know, it was a new concept, people were having to get their head around it. So it is always scary coming in and learning these new things. But I think once you actually begin using something like Bitcoin and just making a transaction, you'll realize actually it's simpler than you imagine, I think. There's a lot of complication around it. That's not always necessary. I guess one of the things, it's a alternative to traditional fiat currencies. So fiat currency being pound, US dollar, euro, so on. They're the currencies that are controlled by central banks and countries and governments around the world. Bitcoin, being decentralized, doesn't have anybody controlling it, doesn't have anybody in power to make changes in a way that doesn't come to consensus by the industry. Apologies, by the way, in advance if I'm trying to keep everything basic if possible, without trying to use too many buzzwords or things that or industry specific words, which we always do, and I tend to do. So pull me up. Feel free to pull me up if you use any words that I use that you're not sure what they are. Just give me a shout.
No worries.
One of the big key pieces of it as well is being able to, with it being decentralized and being able to, it's peer-to-peer, you can control your money yourself and hold the Bitcoin in your own personal wallet, which can be just a piece of software running on your mobile phone or your computer. That's something that has never been possible in the past. Obviously, where you store your money now would be in a bank or some sort of like PayPal or so on. With Bitcoin, you can store that yourself, keep it yourself, and you're in control of your own money, which is revolutionary in itself and revolutionary from a global perspective. I think what we have to also consider, and I think I'll touch on later on, I'm sure, with Bitcoin being the global currency it is, it's not always about UK and the US and Europe and things like that. You know, we live in them countries and we're living and breathing that, and we're living our everyday lives here, but there's the rest of the world that are living in very different lives and very different worlds. Their governments may not be friendly to certain things, and their currencies may be as we've seen with Venezuela and a couple of other South American ones where they've gone into hyperinflation and currencies have effectively been destroyed. They're the sort of countries, they may not also have like banking infrastructure in place like we do in the UK. And these are the ones that sometimes we kind of ignore, but Bitcoin is effectively for everybody and everybody throughout the world, and not just the country we live in and drive. Sorry, I just got distracted with some of the questions there, asking about price dips, which I'm sure we're going to get into at some point.
Yeah, we'll get onto that later on. So how does Bitcoin get its value?
Do you want me to jump into that one as well?
You can take this one.
So generally, I guess like with anything, where does it get its value from? Simple supply and demand. So if you, similar to houses or anything like that, it's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it at the end of the day. So the simple answer is it's supply and demand. With Bitcoin only ever on 21 million Bitcoin that will come into circulation, that makes a finite amount. Again, a first sort of revolutionary stage with that. You've got things like gold and silver and things like that, where they have a it's not quite a finite amount, but it's a restricted resource or amount that they have out there. It's they can still keep mining it and keep bringing more and more gold into circulation. I think even more recently we saw, was it the jewelry shop? I forgot what they're called now. Pandora. They've announced that they're now only using diamonds that have been created in the lab. So they're creating artificial diamonds for all of their jewelry now, which is quite a change obviously for the diamond industry. They've been mining the diamonds for years. That sort of thing changes. That's not possible with Bitcoin. You can't create a fake Bitcoin or an artificial Bitcoin. So it has some great strengths in there with that. So yeah, original question, supply and demand is the simple answer for that.
Yeah. And I mean, how do you see Bitcoin coming from a consumer? How do you see it impacting the industries in maybe today or in a couple of years' time and so on?
Yeah. So with Bitcoin being at its foundations a peer-to-peer currency, it's like giving people a new way to transact. We're seeing, I think, at the moment, Bitcoin, I think, predominantly is being used as sort of like a way to an investment, a type of investment, but we're seeing like a lot of people using it as an actual currency, which is how it was kind of intended to be used. One of the great things about Bitcoin is, Danny covered sort of in the first bit, is that it's not controlled by anybody. So that means that it has borderless properties as well, which means that, you want to buy something in the US from a US based merchant or something like that. If you pay with Bitcoin, you don't have to worry so much about exchange rates and stuff like that. It's borderless. It's also 24/7. So I'm sure everyone's aware there's banking hours and, the 9 till 5 and not open on a weekend, but Bitcoin is a 24/7 industry. You can send payments, send Bitcoin and make transactions to people anywhere in the world, any time, any day. So that in itself, I think, is how that's going to impact industries.
Yeah, I think, it depends on the industry that we talk of. I think it's kind of comparison to the internet, or comparable, to the internet. When the internet first started in the 90s, you didn't really know what it was going to become and how it was going to work. It was just like, originally it started out to share documents. Originally it was war related side, but it eventually became to share documents around the world with universities and share resource and information and knowledge. And then, now it's become social media and Twitter and TikTok and things like that. They were things that weren't dreamt of back in the 90s. And that's what it eventually became. And it's over the years, the internet has disrupted, obviously the retail high street, the media, it's the post infrastructure. It's disrupting so many industries around the world. And that is kind of, I guess, where we start to see Bitcoin at the minute. People see it as, okay, it's a currency or it's an investment, a store of value. It can be a variety of things people refer to it as. And initially, that's correct. That's what it kind of is at the minute. But it's also this foundational layer for a new monetary system. And from that point, there's going to be things built on and around on top of it that will become disruptive in various industries, and quite honestly, very similar to I guess the way we saw the internet being disruptive. I'll give you a bit of an example rather than lots of words. One thing that I think a lot of people push on in our industry, so you've got Bitcoin as this base layer, and that's the secure foundation. On top of that, which we call that one layer 1. Then on top of that, you'll get things like layer 2 and layer 3 and so on. So layer 2, there's something called the Lightning Network, which is it's kind of been built for payments, so instant, very cheap payments on the Bitcoin network. So it uses effectively smart contracts to enable the participants to be able to lock into Bitcoin or into the Bitcoin network, to be able to then perform transactions on the Lightning Network, which are kind of off the Bitcoin network, but still tied to it in a clever way. That is great. That was initially envisioned for Bitcoin payments, online e-commerce, and so on. But what that started to open up the door for now is streaming money. So it's kind of changing a little bit of mentality of the way people think. So an example one would be podcasts. So there's an app called Sphinx Chat, is it called? Mm-hmm. Which they've done an app which is a Lightning wallet, but you can also stream your podcasts on it. So you can put your podcast on, and when you play that out to your listeners will also have a Lightning wallet or a Sphinx wallet. They'll be listening to the podcast, and if they listen to 20 minutes of it, they might pay a Satoshi per minute, and they pay 20 Satoshis. If they only listen to 10 minutes, they only pay 10 Satoshis. So all of a sudden you're paying and streaming money for the services you use, rather than at the minute you might pay a subscription every month, which might be, let's say, Spotify, and you pay 10 quid a month. Actually, you could pay as almost a pay-as-you-go, and you're instantly streaming Lightning payments over every minute you listen to a song. You're streaming a Satoshi over each time. Satoshi, by the way, being a fraction of a Bitcoin, just in case people weren't aware of that one.
So amazing. Like the pennies, aren't they, to pounds?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead. Go.
Yeah. So there's things like that. There's another great example more on an e-commerce side for yourselves, from the B2B side. So you'll see things like Shopify, for example, where people are starting websites, e-commerce websites on this platform, and you've got all your payment methods and things on there. There's another one which has been prototyped, and it does work, and we've actually made some payments and made some orders ourselves. But you can create a Lightning web shop. So the website has Lightning payments enabled in it, but it also means that you don't need card processors and things like that. So it removes the PCI compliance, and even data protection side, it removes, because you don't have to store the data in a database or an online database. What you can do is, when you make the Lightning payment, you can attach the data within the Lightning payment. So you can attach your delivery address and your name and everything inside that, and the merchant will receive this, and they'll receive that on the Lightning Network. Once that's been paid and done for, it can effectively disappear, and it's not stored in an online database. So it starts removing attack vectors from security aspect as well, and privacy aspect. So there's all these things that are slowly being prototyped and coming. Sorry, this is a little bit techier than maybe people might want me to go into there. But that's kind of, I guess, an insight into the future of what's slowly being built around the industry and what's potentially to come.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting, and thank you everyone for sending in your questions. We'll get to them at the end. So Molly, this is probably one for you. Why should, if I'm an SME business owner, why should I consider Bitcoin as a payment method?
Okay, from a business side, I guess there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, first of all, competitive advantage. By sort of adding Bitcoin payments, it is just, I feel like, having come out of this pandemic, there's a lot of small businesses that have been affected and trying to find new ways to get back on their feet. And by adding Bitcoin, it's a way to stand out from the crowd. I think a lot of people are aware, or have at least heard of Bitcoin, and then if you are then shouting about that you're accepting it, it's kind of like an attention grabbing thing. On that subject, then, I guess, from sort of like the PR perspective, we've seen a lot of companies announcing that they are adding Bitcoin, and then the sort of the PR they get off the back of that, and the new customers they receive as a result. it does wonders for their business. From the sort of fee side, I guess, Bitcoin transactions are typically cheaper than like your Visa or your MasterCard transactions for the business, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So there's that advantage for the actual business processing those transactions. And, you know, it sounds like a weird one, but the Bitcoin community is actually very loyal and very supportive of any companies that accept Bitcoin. So with, you know, by announcing that you're accepting it, you're going to gain a lot of new customers and new supporters from that aspect too.
Yeah, I think it's probably difficult, especially if you are brand new to the whole Bitcoin world, how you can kind of get started and as a business owner, kind of add it to your balance sheet. How can businesses add Bitcoin to their balance sheet?
So businesses really, effectively when saying adding it to the balance sheet is just, they're just purchasing it as an asset. So Bitcoin is actually deemed an asset in the UK. So that's not, it's like you buying a house or a car or something. It's just an asset there that you would purchase. So you would effectively come along to a company like ourselves. We deal with a lot of businesses in the Isle of Man, UK, that then buy Bitcoin with us. So they'll create an account with us. Whether depend on the volume, they may do more of a handheld service through, or they may be happy to just go on the website and just buy it themselves and do it themselves. So then it's as simple as that. It's really not that complex in that respect. We are seeing more and more businesses now starting to do this same process, and that's smaller businesses as well. I know we've seen the likes of Tesla, MicroStrategy, Square. There's a Guggenheim's, there's quite a lot of businesses now around the world that are starting to purchase Bitcoin and add that to their balance sheet as an investment store of value, sort of safe haven asset, whatever you want to class that as, or however they want to classify it. That's what is happening now. Smaller businesses, as I mentioned, there are starting to as well, but they don't quite announce and make as big an impact as the Teslas and Squares. Sorry, yeah, I won't go on. So I was going to go on something else there, but it's more of a B2C angle, so I'll leave that one till later.
We've had a lot of questions in through the chat box, and I know Annie asked about what is the difference between other cryptocurrencies. Does Bitcoin have any competitors? And if it does, then what's the difference between and what kind of stands them out in the market compared to other cryptocurrencies?
Jump in again. my hatred for altcoins. No, there's I think we're towards now 10,000 what classify as altcoins, alternative currencies. It's difficult. There's no easy answer to say what's the difference between Bitcoin and all them other altcoins at the end of the day, because they're all different in their different ways. Some of them, the majority of them, very early on especially, are just clones, just called themselves something different, and they've tried to release something. Some of them will just tweak certain technicals and certain mechanics within the code effectively to make it change from, as an example, Bitcoin has 21 million in circulation. Some of them early days just changed that 21 million to 42 million and said we're something different. So it didn't really do anything of impact to them sort of alternative currencies there. There is other ones now that are starting to branch off into more of a niche angle, where they are trying to be like Ethereum, where you're a smart contract platform, and they're trying to be something slightly different. So it's not quite, again, it's not the same as Bitcoin as such, but people will obviously classify and compare them. But it's more of an orange and an apples comparison. It's not really an apples and apples comparison. So there is competitors as such, direct competitors. There's not really any. There is out there, of course. I'm sorry, that's maybe wrong terminology. There's plenty of them, but there's maybe not any that are on the same playing field as Bitcoin. I think the unique situation and the uniqueness of how Bitcoin was created has kept, and I guess the community that was then built around that has kept it decentralized, and in a decentralized manner that the other ones that are starting up now just cannot compete with. So which is why they don't try and compete head to head, and they try and branch off and create some sort of niche angle of it, whether that be smart contracts or I know people going down the NFT route at the minute and things like that. There's all sorts that they're trying to spin off into, effectively try and use Bitcoin's base, should we call it, and spin that in a way to try and disrupt a different industry, and try and disrupt something that is like the NFTs are trying to disrupt the art industry, and the smart contracts one with Ethereum are trying to disrupt the kind of hosting companies, should we call it, and the AWS and Microsoft Azure and things like that. So they're all spinning off and doing their own little things. It's hard to compare, especially 10,000 of them.
I think it's important to point out as well, though, a lot of them are centralized. So where with Bitcoin being a decentralized, the person or people who created Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, they're not involved in Bitcoin anymore, which keeps the whole it keeps it decentralized, whereas a lot of the cryptocurrencies that are out there do have someone who has created it and is still very active in like that particular project, which then runs the risk, if there's a person at the top, then they could just one day decide to turn off. Yeah. So I think that's one of the big sort of advantages to Bitcoin versus other cryptocurrencies, is that it is driven by the community. And with that, Bitcoin actually has the largest community of developers working on Bitcoin, whereas a lot of the other cryptocurrencies don't, which is what keeps Bitcoin developing, new stuff coming out all the time. We do see that. I know, these other cryptocurrency projects pop up, but unfortunately they just don't have the support from the developers that Bitcoin does, which is why Bitcoin has been around for 13 years now.
Yeah, I think it's the infrastructure around it and things like that. As Molly touched on there, you can take the likes of Dogecoin, which I'm sure everybody's seen recently, that Elon Musk was kind of pushing, and it's had a bit of a rally, or a lot of a rally. The reality of that is, okay, people are speculating on the price movements of it, is what that is. The reality of what that actually is a currency and a coin. It has no real infrastructure around it. It doesn't have any developers. The last development to it was done back in November 2019, I think it was. So there was no code changes and no updates, and there was nobody maintaining and looking after it really at that point. We did have some, I think, in February this year, but that was because of the hype around it. But they don't really have a team of developers. Whereas the likes of Bitcoin has got a team of experts now that have been in this industry since day one, pretty much, for some of them, and some of them even before day one, as some of their technologies was used to create Bitcoin, which was technologies that these guys are experts in, whether it's cryptography or networking or any of the things around that what Bitcoin was built on. So I guess the infrastructure and when I say infrastructure, that's companies, people, community, everything around it. For Bitcoin everything happened in such a unique way. I think the first mover advantage was massive benefit to it, and that's the way it moved. And the experts around this industry kind of flocked to Bitcoin, was the general gist of it. So recreating that in another currency is a very, very difficult situation. It's not likely to be done, I don't think.
I just want to add, I think as well, there's a reason why, the likes of MicroStrategy are adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet and not Dogecoin or, any of these other cryptocurrencies. It's because Bitcoin does have that substance to it, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's a really complex subject, and we could probably talk about it all day. Yeah. Before we take it to the floor and if the guys can ask the questions, top 3 tips. What are your top 3 tips to get your foot in the Bitcoin door?
Do you want to do one and I'll do one, and then
I can do.
Put you on the spot a bit.
I guess it depends on what you take a step back maybe, and then say, what are you, when you want to get your foot into the Bitcoin door, what are you trying to do? You're looking at this from a business perspective to utilize it, or are you looking to just as an individual get into it? As an individual, come and buy a little piece. A lot of the time people think you've got to buy a full Bitcoin, which is like, $40,000, I think we're at the minute. You can come along to us and buy like £5 worth, £10 worth. It doesn't have to be a lot. And you can buy it, try it out and see what it's all about really. So the easiest way is to just jump in and buy something small.
Mm-hmm. I think probably my key point is, like, we shout about it a lot in this industry, but to do your own research. Just because Elon Musk is tweeting about how he's going all in on Dogecoin, like, don't just think, oh, that's a great idea just because Elon Musk tweeting about it. It's important to actually, with any investment or anything like that, it's always important to actually understand what you're investing in, the risks involved, because there's always risks involved, especially with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. The markets are quite volatile. So doing your own research is incredibly important. That said, it is always good to sort of like look at others' experiences. The sort of Bitcoin community in itself is very engaged, and we'll talk about experiences that they've had with certain exchanges or certain businesses. And you can gather a general consensus of what a Bitcoin business is like just by sort of reading what people say about them.
Yeah. A third one, I feel like I'm just pushing our products here, which I apologize. I don't mean to be doing that. One of the other things we've got is earning Bitcoin. So you can, we call it earn Bitcoin, but if you're shopping online, so similar to what would be cashback websites you might use. So you'll go and use this website or use our website, for example. We've got over 1,000 UK merchants now, and you'll be able to go and shop at their merchants online on their website. Whatever you buy, you will get a percentage of that back in Bitcoin. So it allows people to, if you're going to go and buy something anyway from PC World Couriers or something like that, you can come through our site first and you'll get some Bitcoin back on whatever you purchase. So it's a nice way to dip your toes in as well, without having to spend any money.
Yeah, I think you're making it sound so easy, and I think that's kind of what CoinCorner does as well. It just makes it easy for the consumer. So we've had a question from Gary, and he's asked, what does the future look like for Bitcoin? What do you see it being, even tomorrow or in 10 years time? What do you see it's such a difficult question, but what do you see the future
very broad
future look like?
Tomorrow to 10 years, I think it's the same these days. It changes so quickly. Do you want to go first and I'll jump in after, give mine?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to I think look at the future of Bitcoin. I think we can look at the past and go from there, in the sense that, it's been around 13 years from where it started to where it is now. So much has changed. There's a whole industry built around this cryptocurrency. You've got exchanges like ourselves. You've got businesses accepting Bitcoin. One of the interesting things that we're actually starting to see at the moment is, for a number of years, there's been a bit of hostility between banking, traditional finance industries and cryptocurrency industry. But now we're actually starting to see the banks become more Bitcoin friendly. And I know certainly in the US, there's a lot of banks, maybe more sort of the private ones, that are offering Bitcoin to their clients. So they're actually embracing it. So I think going forward, I mean, I always think Bitcoin has some potential to be like the future of money. Maybe not necessarily as a, not everyone on the street's going to necessarily be using it to pay for stuff, but as a alternative payment method, it's just how I personally view it will be.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's hard to predict. Molly said correctly that everything changes so quickly. And I think if you compare, again, coming back to the internet example from earlier on, you didn't envision back in the 90s like smartphones and social media and things like that. They were just not even on people's radars. They weren't a thing. Social media wasn't a term. So it's difficult to try and predict what's going to happen on kind of, I guess, the base. But I guess my thought process is Bitcoin is the base layer and things are going to be built on top of that. I think what we have with whether it's used as a currency and things like that, it depends on where you are in the world. Similar to the internet, it depends on where you are in the world to how you're using it and what you're doing. Bitcoin, because it is decentralized, because nobody's controlling it and dictating what it is, it can be used in different ways for different things. So people can use it as an investment, a store of wealth, store of value. Some people can use it as a payment method in other parts of the world. So I think it's going to be used it's going to be more embedded eventually. I think over the next sort of 5 years, we're going to see it more ingrained into general businesses, in banks and things like that. The movement that has begun, and it's going to be happening. I think then how it's actually used as the use case outside of that will become determined by the country you are located in. So I think that's yet to be seen.
That's great, thank you. And Josh has asked, and I think we can't go on and not mention the past week that Bitcoin has had with the whole Elon saga and the things that happened yesterday. Josh has asked, Bitcoin and most other cryptos have completely tanked in the last week. What are your views on that, and will it bounce back?
We can't give investment advice, so we've got to be careful about what we say around this. So please don't take anything we say as investment advice. Just a quick disclaimer. It's kind of, it's hard. Sometimes it sounds a bit weird saying, this is a natural occurrence in the industry. What we see in bull markets, so we kind of been entered into the bull market since the start of the year, I would say. And generally through the bull markets, they can last 12 to 18 months sort of periods. Again, this is going off history of what history has taught us. During them time periods, we have drawdowns, so we have these dips, and this is natural. This is, I think, the third dip during this bull run. I think the 2017 one had something about 6 dips. I can't remember how many the 2013 one had. So that is kind of it sounds weird, and again, it does sound weird saying like, this is normal and this is natural and that's the way it happens. What you end up seeing is, I think, this particular one, it was a bit of a weird, there's no real answer to why that became such the dip it was yesterday, for example. A lot of that looks like it was just from traders and people being liquidated in their certain positions, and it gets a bit more technical about what happened there. So there was no fundamental issues around anything. So the fundamentals of Bitcoin have not changed since yesterday, and they've not changed since last week. They're still there, they're still strong, there's still infrastructure being built, things are still moving forwards. The price fluctuations in between, we kind of begin to ignore these days for a lot of us. Yesterday, maybe a bit of an exception. We did kind of pay attention a bit more to the price yesterday in the office. But that was like, more just watching it in almost an entertaining fashion rather than panicking and worrying about something like that, because, it's a normal fluctuation for us. So yeah, it's normal, and things will consolidate again and accumulate, and people continue to accumulate, consolidate, market it kind of comes back again. I think we're still in a bullish period. It doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon at the minute. So yeah, I could expect Bitcoin to continue back to the heights it was in the previous months.
I think it's important to kind of note as well, I mean, given Bitcoin is up around $40,000 at the moment, but these, like Danny says, it is normal. And if we look at it like kind of in percentage terms, I can't remember what percentage drop it was yesterday.
30%.
About 30%. But it only feels such a big drop because the price of Bitcoin is so high. Like these drops have happened all over the entire history of Bitcoin, but because the value of Bitcoin has been a lot less, then the drops have, felt a lot not as painful, I guess. But that's the thing, as the price of Bitcoin goes up, it's the same percentage drop. It's just, value wise, a lot more, and it feels like it hurts a lot more. But
yeah.
That's great. Thanks very much for your question, Josh. Paul has asked, hi, Danny and Molly. I have a small amount of Bitcoin, so following the question is not coming from a place of opposition, but how sustainable is Bitcoin given its high energy use, especially in light of climate change?
This is a hot topic at the minute.
Is that you?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I mean, this is such a vast subject and topic, so I appreciate I won't be able to get all my points and explanations in here, so apologies in advance for that. But the energy piece is the more energy that's used to mine Bitcoin is a security aspect of things. It's nothing to do with the transactions that are getting processed through the network. So people always try and compare it to Visa's transactions per second and say, if we were to scale Bitcoin up to Visa's transactions per second, we'd need to have more energy than 4 times the amount that's used on Earth right now, and so on. That's just not how it works. That's not how Bitcoin works. The more energy used means the more secure the platform is. So you're effectively using the energy to secure the platform that then people are building on top of, which is actually a very positive thing. So I guess people in the industry like ourselves, so I would see that as the more energy used, the more beneficial it is to Bitcoin and the participants around the industry. Why I'm saying that in security perspective, if you think somebody wants to try and attack Bitcoin and the network, they need to get the majority hash rate, or the majority mining power, which means they need to use a lot of electricity to be able to take over Bitcoin and attack it and destroy it. So now I think we just passed Sweden, I think it was, in terms of the energy used in comparison to a country. People see that obviously as a negative thing. I'll come on to the energy usage in a minute as well, or the energy source, should I say. People may see that as a bad thing, but I guess the industry sees that as a good thing, because it now means that, you know, if Sweden themselves wanted to attack Bitcoin, they literally couldn't. They wouldn't even have the energy resource to be able to attack Bitcoin, let alone the mining machines as well. It's just physically almost impossible to be able to attack and destroy Bitcoin, which is great. It means it's secure. Coming back to the actual energy usage, or the energy source is probably a better way to put it. There's been people straight away jump into all this energy is being used, it's being wasted, blah, blah, blah. What they actually need to look at is not the amount of energy being used, but the source of the energy being used. I think it's between 39 to 73% of mining. It is a wide range, I appreciate that. But also due to decentralized nature of Bitcoin, it's difficult to get an exact figure. But towards 73% of mining power is actually used from renewable energy. So it's not as impactful to the environment as people are thinking. So again, it's a headline sort of clickbait title that people use. And it's not, when you actually read into the detail, it's not as bad as people are making out. Bitcoin is also moving heavily towards renewable energy at the minute. There's lots of new mining companies that are starting up at the minute, are effectively buying. There's one last week, I think was it, that bought a hydro energy power plant, or it was an old one. They've bought that, they're bringing that back into power. And that is going to be running purely off hydro electricity, I think. So again, it's all becoming, they're moving towards the cheaper renewable energy. Bitcoin mining can be done anywhere in the world. It doesn't need to be located around a city where they don't have the resource for the renewable energy. It can be done anywhere in the world, which means it's a benefit to the miners to go off to find the cheapest electricity in the most obscure places around the world. It doesn't matter where they are. So renewable, eventually, I would anticipate, I guess, or predict in the next sort of 5 years, we'll probably see Bitcoin mining towards your 80, 90%, maybe 90% plus as renewable energy anyway. It kind of then kills the whole argument. We want it to use more energy, so it's more secure, but you want that to come from renewables. One of the big things on that as well is it starts to push the innovation for renewables and how they work, which actually is helping innovate the energy industry and electricity industry as a whole anyway. So people, it kind of became a bit of a meme and a bit of a joke one, but it's genuinely the truth. It is, Bitcoin mining is actually helping innovate renewable energy effectively. We've seen Jack Dorsey, who's the guy that owns Twitter and Square, and he's quite big into Bitcoin, and he's just announced a couple of weeks ago about, or released a white paper document effectively outlining how Bitcoin mining can be used to innovate renewable energy. And it talks about how when electricity plants or power stations, create electricity, a lot of it is wasted and not used. So it's making use of that waste electricity, because you can't store it, and there's not very efficient ways to store the electricity at the minute. People are obviously improving on that, Tesla doing that with the batteries and so on. But there's not really a very efficient way. So there's a lot of it goes to waste. So it's using that waste energy to actually mine Bitcoin. And there's tie-ins with that. And I think he was talking about with wind electricity with turbines and how they tie into it. And it's very clever, and it's a very good way to think about it. And it starts changing people's minds and thought process, I guess, once you start reading and learning this stuff. So yeah, not as detrimental as headlines and clickbait make out, is the short.
Bloody Elon. I'm really conscious on time, so this will be the last question. But Helga has asked, and we mentioned about mining. Is there a limit to the amount of times you can mine a year? And will there come a time when the maximum mined has been mined and no more will be mined?
Yes,
Well,
I'm jumping
you're
that.
an
Yes,
X-minus. Go for it.
yes. There's so blocks are mined every 10 minutes roughly, on average. There's how many is it now? 144 blocks mined a day. I can't remember the numbers now, but yes, there's a number every 2 weeks. It's 2016, isn't it? So I'm trying to multiply in my head here to figure out how many blocks are mined in a year. Each block, for example, has 6.25 bitcoins in it. So every block that's found roughly every 10 minutes has 6.25 bitcoins. That will decrease. That decreases every 4 years. So that halves every 4 years from 6.25 to 3.125, and so on until it gets down to 0. The final blocks, or the final rewards of them, bitcoins coming into circulation there, will be the year 2140, I think, roughly. So there is a finite point, which will, at that point, would be the 21 million in circulation. We currently have, is it 18.5 or is it 19 million now? Can't remember. 18.5 million.
18.5 last time I checked.
Bitcoin in circulation at the minute. So the remaining 2.5 million that will be coming in circulation will come in from now until 2140, which is obviously a long time away. So it's a very slow process for them to come into.
That's great. Thank you so much. And so that is all we've got time for today. Another huge thank you to Danny and Molly and all the guys over at CoinCorner. If you want to find out more about CoinCorner or keep up to date with everything Bitcoin related, be sure to follow them. Their Twitter handles are on there on the screen. And if you do have any further questions, and I know that we haven't answered all of them today, just email me. My email's on the screen, and I can pass on your questions to the guys. Our next webinar will be on Thursday, the 24th of June at 11 a.m. on everything you ought to know about being a business owner. We'll be talking about succession planning, protection, all that great stuff. So if you want to keep up to date with all things Prosper Squared, then follow us on all of our socials. And lastly, thank you for everyone for joining, and keep an eye out on your emails for the summary and the link to the YouTube. And I look forward to seeing you all next time. So thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Molly.